This is an extremely simple loaf that I've been making a lot lately. It's a basic white bread, except that all of the water in the recipe has been replaced with pumpkin puree, and that gives it a crazy pumpkin color and a really earthy, mellow flavor. Forget pumpkin spice lattes, we've got pumpkin bread. It's next level. Welcome to fall. It's fall. This is a recipe I developed with a food processor in mind because it makes short work of the dry dough, which is extra thick due to the pumpkin puree. Starting out with bread flour because we're making bread. Next, instant yeast, not rapid rise. Kosher salt. Just gonna pulse this a little bit to distribute the dry ingredients. Most bread doughs are hydrated with water, but here I'm using 100% pumpkin puree. Finally, a bit of maple syrup and melted butter, but you could use liquid oil for a vegan variation. There isn't enough maple syrup to sweeten the dough. It just adds a bit of complexity and helps with browning. Beige mush swirling around. If you work gently, and it starts to form this translucent, in bread lingo, we say this is a window pane. This is a stage of gluten development you won't be able to get kneading by hand or even on a stand mixer. I'm gonna transfer this into a lightly greased bowl. See, it's a strong dough, but it's not very sticky. It feels really good. It feels kind of like warm Play-Doh, which is a delightful sensation. So I just gather it up into a little bit of a ball and then smush it down into a bowl. And I'm gonna cover this up with plastic and just let it proof at room temperature for about 2 hours. How long the dough is gonna take to proof depends entirely on the temperature of your kitchen and the temperature of the dough itself. The dough has been rising for a couple hours. It's gotten really big and puffy. A good way to test it is that when you poke it, my fingerprints remain. If I were to poke this and it were to bounce back, that would be a good sign that it wasn't ready yet, but it is ready. So I'm just gonna turn it out onto the countertop and really mush it down. And I'm folding the dough over itself and then sealing it down a little bit. Get a good clean seal. And then from here, I'm just gonna tuck it under itself a little bit to try and form a neat loaf. Place it into the pan. And it's okay that it's gonna be kind of crammed in there a little tight, that's fine. It's all gonna rise together. And I'm just gonna tap it down a little bit to make sure it's nice and settled and there's not like an air pocket hiding underneath the pan. So now that that's been shaped, I'm gonna cover it with plastic and let it continue proofing for a couple more hours until it's nicely risen and ready to bake. So if you're not really a loaf person, instead of shaping the bread like so, we can do it over again as dinner rolls. Proof the bread in the same way until it's puffy and light. Turn it out and grab a cast iron skillet. If you are feeling extremely precise, you could use a scale to make sure each one of these pieces is the exact same size. But what I'm gonna do is just eyeball it into 12 pieces. So I can kind of visually tell these guys are a little shy and these guys are a little chubby, so I am gonna do a little bit of Robin Hood here to feed these little guys. I'm gonna start by cupping it under my hand, and you're not gonna use any flour for this. You actually want it to stick to the countertops a little bit so that it can form a neat shape. If there's flour, it's just gonna kind of scoot around without any traction. Ball it up. I'm using my fingertips to catch it on this side and my heel to catch it on this side. And just rolling, 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 rolling until it forms a nice tight little ball. And you can use both hands if that helps, if you're not comfortable working with one hand. If you're Sola, you can do it with 2 hands and it's amazing. She's really good at it. I don't have that kind of coordination. And then it's still kind of rough on the bottom and not fully gathered. So I'm gonna keep on doing this number. And so on forever, the thrilling life of a baker. Okay, last little guy, all gathered up into the skillet. I'm just gonna cover that in plastic and let it proof until it's puffy, light, and ready to bake. As you can see, the breads have risen really nicely, both the loaf and the rolls. Once it reaches that stage, it's time to throw them in the oven. Set a 45-minute timer. So after the loaf has come out of the oven, we're gonna tip it out of the pan so that it doesn't steam itself. And then just let it cool upright until all the heat is escaped. If you try to cut it right now, it's gonna be crushed by the knife and the interior is gonna be really dense and wet. So as delicious as it smells and as much as you wanna bite, it's a really good idea to let it cool. Here are fluffy and delicious dinner rolls. The great thing about baking dinner rolls in a cast iron skillet is that it'll really help keep them warm. So if you have to bake it off earlier than you're serving dinner, it'll continue radiating heat so that even by the time you put them on the table, they'll still be nice and warm. Look at this beautiful golden crumb. Vitamin A and anthocyanins. It's a life-giving, vitamin-packed pill of health food. Guys, can we go home now?